Her husband had been a Border Patrol agent for 18 years. So I said, what do we do to determine that those kids that are brought up here have anything genetically to do with the alleged adults that come in with them? And she said that under the Trump administration, we did DNA testing, but now nothing's done, right? There's no proof that any of these adults have anything to do with the kids, except that if you got a kid on your hip, you get to come into the country for free. You get to go to the airport in McAllen, Texas, walk around TSA, and get on an airplane that's chartered with your tax dollars in mind, be flown out and distributed to who knows where. Now, if you or me or she or any of you were to go down to Texas, pick up a 9-year-old girl, put her in the back of our car and drive away, there'd be an Amber Alert out in 5 seconds and we'd all go to jail for the rest of our lives. But here's our government taking possession of not just thousands, but now tens of thousands of minors and doing what with it? Nobody asks a question. Nobody knows the answer to that question. We're Catholics, so I have no anti-Catholic bias, but Catholic Charities in McAllen is supposed to be responsible for distributing these kids. We went down to Catholic Charities in McAllen, Texas. The creepiest thing I've ever seen in my life, okay? It's a full block building. All the windows are painted black. We knocked on the door to go in. We wanted to go talk to see who was in charge. The security guard opens the door and tells us to leave and says the police have already been called. But when you open the door, instead of an entry hall, there's a wall built up right inside the door, like a security checkpoint. So you have to enter the building like this. Patty and I walked down the side of the building, all the windows painted black, put our ears up to the window. It was like a slaughterhouse in there. Not just tens or dozens, but hundreds of screaming children there. God only knows what happens to those kids. But you know, I guarantee you it's nothing that's legal. It's nothing that you would like to know about, but it's something I'd sure like to know about. And why this is happening wholesale, right in front of everybody, and nobody even asks a question. But let's say this year we've got 2.5 million illegal aliens coming in. Think how long it will take for that to just completely erode the voting base of the United States. And they use the left always uses the same number, like 13 million illegal aliens. But if you're getting 2.5 million a year, probably isn't terribly accurate. So I got into all this by talking about how the current government ignores the law. The funds to finish the wall were voted on by the last Congress, signed into law by President Trump, and hundreds of millions of dollars of fencing and wall that we've paid for is laying on the ground in Texas, and the United States government won't allow, for example, the Texas state government to use that to finish the wall. They are prohibiting Greg Abbott and the Texas government from using material we've already paid for, which has been authorized by Congress and signed into law by President Trump, prohibiting them from using it to finish the wall. That's what we've got. We've got a government which ignores the law, which ignores the Constitution. Joe Biden stood up there and said with regard to the eviction moratorium, I know what I'm doing is illegal, I know what I'm doing is unconstitutional, but we're going to do it anyway. And so what the young man in the back row said is absolutely true. This is a last chance to save this country. If they pass, for example, what they now call the John Lewis Voter Rights Act, it was H.R. 1, it was the first bill presented in the new Congress. It will eliminate fair elections for the rest of our lives. They'll nationalize elections. They will have universal, unsolicited mail-in ballots without any proof of ID. You imagine what that's like? In the city of St. Louis, where I live, thank the Lord, I also have a farm out in Franklin County, so I get to vote for a Republican out there. But in the city of St. Louis, the city of St. Louis government owns 10,000 abandoned properties. Yes. Every one of those things was a multi-family house at some point in its life. Every one of them has names associated with it. Under the John Lewis Voting Rights Act, each one of those houses owned by the city of St. Louis will get ballots delivered to it in a big packet on the front porch. Guess who picks those up? Guess who fills out the votes? Guess who stuffs them in the mailbox, okay? That's the end of free elections as we know it. They've got the new gun control bill, which will make you register. Their goal is to eliminate personal property, eliminate individual freedom. They all operate on the concept of Mao, that everybody should have a single identity, and that's as a slave of the government. And that's where all this is headed. And we cannot lose sight of that. All these little distractions, and by little distractions I mean little things like big things, the war in Ukraine, before that, the disaster in Afghanistan, before that, and ongoing inflation, and before that, the border crisis. But all these crises are designed to distract us from the bigger picture. And the bigger picture is that this is a very fast snowballing downhill to totalitarianism. And you gotta stop it now. I mean, and this is bigger than just a contest for the Senate. This is a movement to restore freedom to this country. Regardless of what happens in this campaign, Patty and I have dedicated the rest of our lives to doing everything we can to save this country and pull back our freedoms. No matter what happens in this campaign, we're going to continue doing it. We had no intention whatsoever of running for Senate after the Trump campaign was over. We kept doing the same thing, as I mentioned, that we've been doing with Donald Trump on our own. And I'll continue to do that regardless. But I got to say that if you send Eric Schmidt to the Senate, he's going to be the same guy he is now. And that's the guy who, up until the time that he started to run for Senate, two different U.S. congressmen, and I won't mention their names, used the exact same phrase to describe Eric Schmidt when he was in the Missouri Senate. They both called him the ninth Democrat. He's now this guy who will stand up there and talk about how he sued China. Well, that's great. But what has he gotten from China as a result of that lawsuit? But when he was in the Senate, he promoted a $480 million bill to create a China hub in St. Louis County. That he proposed legislation to sell 1% of Missouri farmland to the Chinese government. You got Vicky Hartzler, who voted for that red flag law, and you've got 80 Republican congressmen that voted for the vaccine database. You had 19 Republican senators who voted for the infrastructure bill, the $2.7 trillion one. You've got on Fox Television 2 days ago, a guy to be around, he's a fun guy to listen to, and quite frankly, I like the Billy bars. My jacket is suffering from it, it's tighter than it used to be. But Billy's been in Congress for 12 years. And he actually says this on the campaign stuff from time to time, that I've only been in front of a camera 4 times in 12 years. Well, that's not a guy that's going to go to the Senate and shake stuff up and make a difference, okay? You need to have somebody up there who recognizes the threat to our future and is willing to do something new and different. People always ask me, what difference would it make if we elected you to the Senate? I always have the same response. You know, if you elect me to the Senate, we will never, real conservative, constitutional conservatives will never make up a majority of even the Republicans in the Senate. You'll have me and Rand Paul and Mike Lee and Ron Johnson and John Kennedy and sometimes Ted Cruz. But what we can make up is the majority of the voices that the American people hear. We can be out there constantly telling people about what's going on in DC, constantly exposing the corruption, constantly exposing the conspiracy to destroy this country. And, you know, I say this all the time. I've been saying it since I was in college. People I went to college with 40 years ago when I announced that I was running for Senate called up and said, you know, when you were talking about this worldwide conspiracy, when you were talking about the New World Order and the Great Reset back when we were in college, we thought you were nuts. But now it's happening right in front of our eyes, and we realize what you were saying is true. But you know, it is true, and it's happening right now, and it's accelerating at a pace that we'll never be able to pull it back unless we do it right stinking now. And you need to have people that are willing to go up there and say that, and not go up there and talk about holding hearings or submitting or sponsoring bills. The time is gone for politics as usual. The time is gone for politicians as usual. This is a war. This is a battle for our soul. It's a battle for the future of this country. It's a battle for the future of freedom worldwide. I mean, Bill Gates, you know, he's obviously knows more than the rest of us because he's richer than we are. But I don't remember him, you know, being particularly well educated in politics. He's a guy that came up with a computer program. But he did say this, with regard to the future. He said, you will own nothing and you will be happy. And for a Newton County Senatorial Forum a week ago last Saturday. And we had 1 minute to close when it's all over. And I had Dave Schatz, Billy Long, Vicky Hartzler, Eric Schmidt on both sides of me. And I just went around, the question was, what makes you the best candidate? I said, 12 years in politics, 12 years in politics, 27 years in politics, 17 years in politics, no years in politics, yes. Right? And that makes a difference. I mean, Einstein's definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over again and expecting a different result. And you know what you have to do these days as a candidate is call around and talk to people and try to squeeze money out of them for the campaign. And so I was talking with a nice little lady today out in Knob Noster, Missouri, and she says, well, I'm going to support Vicky Hartzler. I said, that's nice and it's good. You know, she's a nice lady. I see her almost every night. But she's been a politician for 27 years. And the woman's response was, yeah, but Washington's never changed her. And I said, yeah, but she's never changed Washington, right? And that's the issue that's before us right now. If you like the status quo, if you think the country's headed in the right direction, if you like what's going on right now, then vote for the establishment character. Vote for the candidate that's been in politics their entire adult life. Vote for the candidate who says that I'm only going to do 6 terms in Congress and then I'm going to run for a higher office. Or vote for the people that are endorsed by the traditional party. And then hold your breath and wait for things to change. Because if you do that, things are not going to change except change for the worse. I mean, you look at what's gone on recently. Josh Hawley endorsed Vicky Hartzler. Why? Vicky Hartzler has been in politics almost her entire adult life. Anybody outside of her own district has never heard her name. She votes conservative. This is true. But she doesn't move anything forward. She goes along with the Trump policies. She goes along with conservative ideals. But until she ran for Senate, I never saw her on Meet the Press. I never saw her on Fox TV. I never saw her anyplace. In fact, until my brief career now as a candidate for 8 months, I'd never heard her name at all until I realized that she was somebody I was running against for Senate. But you can't expect Vicky Hartzler to go to the Senate and shake things up. It's just not in her personality, it's not in her character. Billy Long, I like those. Mitch McConnell and Mitt Romney all saying the same words about what we should do to get more involved in the war in Ukraine. And when those 3 gentlemen are all saying the same thing, you got to be going somewhere else. And that's the problem with where we are right now. And so, I'll open this up for questions. Most of you guys have heard me, almost all of you guys have heard me say all this stuff before. But here's the bottom line, I believe it to the bottom of my heart. This country will not survive until the next presidential election. This country may not survive till November. And those of us that have been on the inside of what happened in the last campaign, have a pretty strong belief that there'll be some kind of crisis that arises between now and the first Tuesday in November to create another voting problem, all right? But let's assume we can have an honest vote on August the 2nd. Let's assume we can have an honest vote in November. If we don't take back the House, if we don't take back the Senate, we will have no way of stopping the destruction of this country. And it's not enough to vote for Republicans, because the Republicans are just as much a part of this as everybody else. The problem is that regardless of what the letter is behind their name, by the time they get to run for Senate, the typical person starts off as a city councilman, and then maybe the county commissioner, and then maybe a presiding commissioner, and then maybe they get elected to the Missouri House, and then maybe the Missouri Senate, and then maybe some statewide office, and then maybe the United States Congress, and then by the time they get around to running for the United States Senate, they're pulling behind them this train of lobbyists and obligation and big money donors. And when they have a close question call, the last person they think about is the people that voted for them, because what they have to think about is all those lobbyists and all those millions of dollars that got them to where they are. And if they want to get reelected, and more importantly, if they want to move the next step up the ladder, they have to do what their lobbyists and what the big dollar people want. And so, as I started to say a minute ago, when you see Josh Hawley endorsing Vicky Hartzler and now taking on the unenviable task of trying to convince the people of Missouri that somebody who's been in politics for 27 years, but you've never heard the name of, is your best hope for the future. You have to remember that Josh Hawley has the same political consultant as Vicky Hartzler, right? And when Ted Cruz endorses Eric Schmidt, you have to remember that Schmidt have the same political consultant. And it's the political consultants that run the world. It's the political consultants and the lobbyists and the big corporations that are the deep state and that are the swamp. It's not the politicians, because the politicians work for the lobbyists, work for the political consultants, and work for the big corporations. And for example, take the top people in this race, at least according to the press. You got Eric Greitens. Uline gave him $2.5 million. The guy who founded Home Depot gave him $1 million. Eric Schmidt was just down in Mar-a-Lago over the weekend raising $1.6 million. I think $1.5 million of that came from Rex Sinkefeld. All these people are just now the purchased representatives of big money interests and the people that are the perpetual government. The only way we're going to wrest ourselves free of this, the only way we're going to restore this country and restore freedom and retrieve this noble experiment in freedom called the United States of America, when for the first time in the history of the world, our seminal documents, our Declaration of Independence, and our Constitution were specifically designed to protect people from the power of government instead of giving the government power over the people. If we're going to pull this back, it has to be right now. Because and it has to be with people that aren't just traditional Republicans, and it sure as heck can't be with Democrats. I didn't bring my button today. I normally wear a big button that says Rhino Remover. And that's more important than Democrat Remover, because at least you're watching the Democrats, but the rhinos you think are working for you when they're really working against you. So, ladies and gentlemen, that's all I have to say tonight. I can't tell you how much I think this country is in absolute peril. Last thing I want to do with my life is have to go up to D.C. and fight the establishment. But as my old buddy G. Gordon Liddy said, I'm not subject to intimidation, and I've got no obligations. I've never been a candidate for anything before. I don't owe anybody anything. I'm not obligated to any lobbyists or any big corporations. And I promise that if you elect me to the Senate, I'll go up there and spend every day of my life trying to fight for this country. Thank you very much. Bueller? Yes.
I don't have a question, but I just want to thank you for what you had to say. I agree with you 1,000%. I feel exactly the same way you do. And I think that hopefully the people in this room understand that the corruption is not just at the national or the state level. It goes all the way down to the city level as well. And change starts at the local level. And if you're not removing what's at the local level and the same old, then you're going to continue down the same path. Just like you said, same people in office, same thing. You may as well expect the same thing. So everything that you said, I appreciate. I'm a first-time candidate as well. I identify with that. Not getting, money from people and being beholden to people, but running because I feel like I know what constitutionally what's right, and I will stand for that freedom. And I appreciate what you said because I identify with it. So thank you.
Appreciate it. Well, if the old guard always appoints a new guard, you always have the same guard.
Yes.
And that's
exactly right.
And that's what. And by the way, the one thing. This running for Senate has been a real education for me in a lot of ways. First of all, I've had to fire all my traditional political consultants because all they want to do is further their own careers, have you raise a lot of money so they can spend it and so they can talk about how much money was raised in their campaign for U.S. Senate. They don't care whether you win or lose. They have absolute disdain for the voters. They think that they don't care who the candidate is because they think the candidate is irrelevant to the campaign. That the consultants run the campaign, and if you spend your money the right way and you buy the right ad time and the right ad space, you can get anybody elected, and they really don't care. And the person that exemplifies that the most is Eric Greitens, because he shows up for nothing, right? And he believes that when the end comes, when it's July, and the last couple of weeks of June and the month of July, that he'll just litter the airspace with tens of millions of dollars worth of political ads, and to heck with what the voters believe. He'll tell the voters what to believe. And that's just a level of disdain. It's a level of it's not even corruption, it's worse than that. It's that they don't believe in the democratic process at all. They don't believe in voters at all. They think we're all a bunch of sheep out here that can be manipulated by dollar bills. And you know, we have to show them that we can stand up and resist that. If I were to say one thing today, so each of them find 10 or 15 more people that understand what's going on and get them motivated. Tell them to get out there and vote in the primary. Tell them to get out there and work for a candidate, because you can't count on anybody else anymore. You can't count on the Republican Party. The one thing that I've learned about the Republican Party is that it picks the winners and losers at a very early stage. That it picks I don't know how many people are running for Senate as Republicans now, maybe 16, 17, something like that. The party has picked 3 that they want you to choose from. And they don't care which of those 3 you pick, because they're all the same as far as the party's concerned. They're all known quantities that will do as expected, that will do the party line, and will vote in ways that aren't radical, that aren't confrontational, and will progress the existing program forward incrementally. And that's why they've identified the anointed ones. And that starts at every level. It starts at school board level, it starts at county sheriff's level, it starts from the smallest level to the top. Political organizations choose their favorites. And that's what has to stop. We have to divest ourselves of the party system and really have, I call this a post-political time in America for that reason, that you really have to get away from party structure and just elect people as individuals that really demonstrate the core values that you stand for. Yes, ma'am.
I've heard recently about the United Nations being involved in our Mississippi River and the mayors up and down our river. Even Roy Blunt was recognized as well as a local official. Can you shed any light and help me understand what that's about?
Well, you know, I wish I had more information on that. I will plead ignorance of that. My vague understanding is that all of this falls in the category of environmentalism. But
it's the United Nations.
Well,
you know, why are they on our river? Why are they on our town?
Bike paths. They're also on the bike paths.
Oh yeah. Well, because we are a multinational nation. Don't you understand that? The United States of America has this duty to help the rest of the world. I wrote these numbers out. I didn't bring them with me this morning. John Kennedy was on Fox this morning, and he was saying that this last April, the Department of Treasury allocated $40 billion with a B dollars of American money to Red China, 17 billion to Russia, 5 billion to Iran. Right? This is our money. This is stuff where, and then think about the wall. President Trump $5 billion more to build the wall. We gave almost 10 times that much to the Chinese communists in a year when they, as a result of the China virus, they decimated our economy. So the answer to your question is yes, we invite the United Nations into our country to tell us what to do. Anthony Blinken at the United Nations last year, our illustrious Secretary of State, declared that the United States was a racist and immoral country, and we invited the United Nations in to investigate us for our racist tendencies. I mean, that's the Secretary of State of the United States. Alejandro Mayorkas, whose family fled Cuba to get away from the communists, this spring said with regard to the Cubans who were trying to escape Cuba, who were risking their lives to come to South Florida. He said, even if they risk their lives on the sea to get here, even if they can demonstrate that they might be subject to arrest and even torture if we send them back to Cuba, we're going to send them back anyway, right? While we open the southern border to every South American and Central American and Mexican and terrorists from all over the world, if you're a Cuban, you're not allowed in the country. Why? You think they might vote Republican? You know, this is all just so reprehensible on every level. But yeah, of course, we owe a duty to the rest of the world to not produce oil in this country because oil is bad. So we get to buy it from Iran and Russia, and somehow when they drill for oil there, it doesn't pollute, and when we buy it from them, it doesn't pollute. But when we produce our own, it's a bad thing. And why is that? Because these people don't want America to be self-sufficient. They don't want America to prosper. Their whole game plan is from the unrest in the streets and the war against police and 28 different cities run by George Soros-funded prosecutors who refuse to prosecute crime, to inflation, to destruction of our energy independence, everything that this government has done in the last 13 months is all designed for the same reason. And that's to undermine our security, undermine our economy, and undermine individual liberty, and try to get people beholden to the government. There's a sign on when you walk in this building that says "Help Wanted, Apply Within." Every business I've seen for the last year has got a sign saying "Help Wanted, all positions." Why? Because the government has learned that people are willing to take a reduction in lifestyle rather than work. Okay? They're willing to live in their basements or live rather than work because they've been trained to lose their incentive. They've been trained through the COVID lockdowns and the government handouts that just existing without having to work is something that they're willing to accept. We try to practice law still a little bit, but you try to get a lawyer on the phone, try to get a paralegal on the phone, try to get a secretary on the phone. Some of the biggest law firms in St. Louis are still working at home, meaning not working at all. And you can't get anything done. And this isn't accidental. This is all a game plan. The people dependent on the government. If everybody's dependent on the government can turn everything off. And I tirade on and on and on. I got a billion examples. Why do you think they want us to drive electric cars? I mean, anybody who's got a farm or a rural property will have a large dump of fuel, right? You'll have some diesel, you'll have some gasoline. You turn off the lights at my farm, I can drive vehicles for about 6 months. If you got an electric car, they turn off the lights. What are you going to do tomorrow? Right? That's it. Because the government always wants to control your ability to move about freely. They want to control your ability to protest, to get places, to organize, to do what the First Amendment calls to peaceably assemble to seek redress of your grievances. They don't want you to be able to do that. Why does the government want to take your guns? Well, here's my hat. This is my 1 + 2 = 3 hat. First Amendment plus Second Amendment equals freedom. We call that McClosky math. Because without the Second Amendment, all the rest of our rights are just hypothetical. If we aren't able to defend ourselves, if we don't pose some threat to the government that we're able to resist, then we're nothing more than sheep in a pen. And the government knows that. And the government is always trying to take away what they call assault weapons. Now we'll just digress one more time. A guy named David Chipman was being nominated to be head of ATF. But they asked him if he could define an assault weapon, since that's what the left always wants to take away from us, is these things they call assault weapons, and he couldn't do so. Well, a couple of days later, I was being interviewed by a national news program, and I was giving him trouble over that. And they said, well, can you define an assault weapon? I said, sure, it's easy. It's an effective defense against an overreaching government. And that's what the Second Amendment is all about. How did I get there? That was your question? Anybody else? Anybody have nerve to ask me a question after that answer? Don't be silly, vote for Bill. I know that's his line.